Thank you. I think I win the prize for the longest title of a session today. Christian, I think you were saying you thought you had the death slot after lunch. I'm convinced actually that the final slot of the day is the hardest one, to be honest, because you've all sat through presentations all day and it's been great, but you know, it's hard in a windowless room. So I'm going to try to go for 30 minutes and keep you engaged. I want to start off just by, I don't know if you've seen, as you come into the hotel, you've seen the fantastic art on display. Now, have you seen that massive picture of Marilyn Monroe as you come in? Has anyone actually noticed that these pictures are for sale? And guess how much the Marilyn Monroe one is available for? Yeah, more, higher. 30,000 euros. And they're all over the... so there's a lot of very valuable art in this hotel. Now, I arrived yesterday evening from a long journey from the UK. I was tired, it was snowing, I was hungry. So I came down to the hotel bar, to the restaurant, said, I'll get some food, please. You know, he sat me down. She said, look, it's going to be a while for the food to come. You know, it could be an hour. I was like, joking, yeah. And there was two girls working. And they were trying to cover the bar food area, they were trying to cover the restaurant area. And I thought, well, this is hopeless. And in the end, I had a bowl of soup and some bread. I managed to spill the soup down my shirt as well, which wasn't great. And so the customer experience was pretty awful actually for me. And one of the key things about a hotel, you think, would be, you know, getting your staffing right on a Monday night, Tuesday night, whatever it was, on a Monday night to serve the weary travellers that have come. So what's that got to do with the art? Well, I'm guessing that somebody has thought, you know, this art will make a lovely, wonderful customer experience. You come to our hotel and it's lovely. It's a very posh hotel. I usually stay in a travel lodge or something really cheap. This is lovely and luxurious. So that customer experience is great. But where they've fallen down is actually in a really boring bit of operational planning around number of people versus number of customers that you need. And so what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this afternoon amongst my meanderings is some of the boring customer service operational stuff that if you don't get that right, then actually all the digital transformations and things that you do will probably be wasting your money. So just a quick bit about me. So I'm customer service director at Hyperoptic. Through my career, I've either done customer service operations or transformation roles. Spent my entire career until 12 months ago in insurance. So I know very little about telco other than what I've learned in the last 12 months. And I've worked internationally. I've worked across Asia, Europe, and so on. And I'm a systems thinker. And I'll happily bore any of you over a glass of wine later about systems thinking and what that is. I'm also, this is me here with my son. I've mentioned my son in one of the sessions earlier around the table. And it's a great lesson in brand loyalty that there am I as a Norwich City supporter, and I'm already indoctrinating my son, age 4, to a life of suffering like me. As a Norwich City supporter. And I got O-level maths. I'm not sure what that translates to in Germany, but I was never a great sort of mathematician at school. But what I've learned through my career is that numbers and maths and data is really important. And I've become a bit of a sort of data geek through the years just by realising that actually most managers are really rubbish at maths and really rubbish at using data and drawing the wrong conclusions from data. Look, this tells us, no, it doesn't. The data doesn't tell you that. And I'm going to talk a bit about data as we go through here today. Just very briefly about Hyperoptic. I guess many of you won't have heard of us. So we are a 12-year-old broadband company. We deliver full fibre to the customer's home, which means we can give you like a gigabit of internet speed. And we are one of the so-called altnets in the UK, challenging the big providers. And part of our kind of challenger brand is about being the customer champions. And I'm going to talk to you a bit today about our kind of customer, our approach around customer journeys. Now, I've put this up here because I'm conscious on the last session of the day. This is what I'm going to talk about. And so I'm going to talk to you about how we've brought our voice of the customer data to the heart of our kind of planning and forecasting. I'm talking about how this kind of voice of the customer program can really drive some actionable insights. If this is of interest to you, please stay. If it's not, then crack on with your emails or go for a beer. But hopefully it will be relevant and tangible. And what I've tried to do is to focus on some very practical things that you can maybe take away and do yourselves. Also, I should say that it's a bit tricky when you're doing a presentation full of data. My boss had a heart attack when I said I was sharing this data. So much of the data in here is kind of tweaked and amended and sort of anonymized, but hopefully some of the key messages will still come across. Right, so what I'm going to start off with is a really important bit of theory, I suppose, that I think is the key thing when you're running a customer service operation, the key thing you need to understand. And that's that when you study the demand, i.e. the customer contacts that are coming into your operation, there are essentially two types of contact. You've got value demand, which is kind of what your system is there to do. So from my insurance days, I want a quote for car insurance. I want to report a claim. I want to make a change to my policy. So they're the kind of straightforward standard processes. And then you've got what we call failure demand. And failure demand is the stuff where, from the customer's point of view, something's sort of gone wrong. And they're having to contact you because things aren't progressing as they should. So it might be, well, what's happening with my claim? I mean, anyone works, the lady from Lemonade was here earlier. I can guarantee you any insurance company claims department you go to in the world, the number one demand that you will find is, what's happening with my claim? So that's a failure demand. Or I've not received something, or your website's not working, right? So in a typical contact center, what would you imagine the balance between value demands and failure demands would be? What percentage would you think would be value demand in your typical contact center operation? Don't all shout at once, please. 60 value, 40 failure. Okay, yeah. Reverse that, 40 value, yeah. Yeah, so fantastic. The reality is that it could be any of those. It depends on where you're studying. But my experience, and I've done this with kind of contact center teams, say all over the world, is that about 30-70. Now, if you go to your company's IT help desk, it's probably like 0-100. Right? Nobody calls the IT help desk and they want to go, hi guys, my system's working really well, thanks very much. So it's all failure demand, and actually understanding that is really key. So I joined Hyperoptic so just over a year ago. And what was clear was that the team didn't have a really good handle on why customers were contacting us. We knew we got a lot of contacts, and at times we struggled to handle those contacts, didn't really understand what they were. So the starting point, before you go into any kind of digital transformations, you need to know, well, what am I transforming? Why are customers contacting me? So what I'm going to start to do is to share with you some of the ways we went about doing that. The other thing I should just point out is that when you're looking at your process of value demand is probably the stuff that you want to start off with when you're talking about automating or digitizing, because they are kind of standard processes. I want to make a claim, but it's a nice standard process for that. Whereas with your failure demands, that's the stuff which gets a bit trickier because it's not standard. No two customers tend to be the same. The things that have gone wrong for you may not be the things that have gone wrong for you. So understanding what's your value demand definitely helps you, and how much of it you've got gives you an idea of what your opportunity for kind of easy automation is going to be. So with the team at Hyperoptic, how we kicked this off is we got our all of our team leaders in the contact center together, and this is a model that I've used countless times, and it works really well. And if you have, if you work in marketing and you want to go and listen to calls in your contact center, this is a good model to follow, for example. Or if you get senior leaders that like to come and say, oh, I'll come and listen to some calls in your contact center, get them to do it this way because it helps to structure the thinking and that understanding. So really kind of high-tech stuff here, flip chart lines. And we sat down, listened to calls, and we said, right, so first of all, who's calling? So is it a customer? Is it an agent? Is it a third party? So on. The next really important bit is that we write down in the customer's words why you were calling. And I'm talking about calls here. The same works for emails, chats, whatever it will be. Why were they called in the customer's words? Why is that important? Because you can pick up some kind of subtleties and nuances in what the customer is telling you that very often we tend to think in terms of process. So, in my car insurance world, we would talk about a substitution of vehicle process. Whereas the customer would call and go, "Oh, I've just bought a new car." And it's sort of a bit different, in terms of what the customer is telling you and therefore how you maybe want to think about managing that process. Then you look at, is this the first time the customer is contacting you about this, or is this a follow-up? And then we look at whether it was value or failure. From the customer's point of view, do we think this is a value demand or a failure demand? Then we look at how we respond to that. How good is our system, our processes, at actually giving the customer what they want? So FPR stands for, this is always the fun of doing things in different languages. So that stands for first point resolution, i.e. from the customer's point of view, they got what they wanted on that first call. So, I want to order a pizza, the pizza kind of gets delivered. PO stands for pass on. That means that the person to whom the customer is speaking is not themselves able to resolve what that customer needs. I need to pass that on to another kind of internal team. So it might be I need to send somebody out to your house, or it might be I need to get a technical support person to do something. So I'm now relying on somebody else. And then PB stands for pass back. So it's like, actually, Mr. Customer, I need you to do something. So back to the insurance claims example, it might mean I need you to send me some receipts. So it's now kind of have your monkey back. You've got to do something. All right. So understanding that is really important. I'll show you why in a second. And then finally, we asked the team leaders to give, if you were the customer, out of 5 stars, what would you give us in terms of your kind of feel-good factor about the organisation? And again, there's no right or wrong answer there, but it helps the people listening to the calls to start to think about it from the customer's point of view, listen to the customer. So that's how we go about doing that. We listen to 156 calls in this case. And again, this is a really nice model for actually understanding and demonstrating what's going on in your contact center. So for the 156 calls that we had, look at this. 42, 28% were value demands, and 72% were failure demands. Okay, that in itself is interesting. But what's then interesting is when you then come down here and you say, and of those 42, 18 of them we managed to resolve on the first point of contact. Now, if you work in a contact center, the best calls you can get are value demand calls that I can handle. And the customer goes, well, I think, well, that's fantastic. They were so easy to do business with. Okay? In our case, that's 12% of what comes in. The worst calls to have, if you're working in a contact center, are these ones down here. Obviously, the red on red doesn't work, does it? So it's a failure demand call that I can't actually handle. I've got to give it to somebody else because I can't deal with it, or even worse, I've got to give it back to the customer to do something. And that was 50% of what we had coming in. So it really starts to kind of give you a flavour of what's going on from a customer point of view and where some of your priorities maybe need to be. And again, from that data, we can see what our volume of repeat calls was. So 6% of customers were calling us, for the second or more time, and we were giving ourselves, an average of 2.2 stars. So it gives a really sort of great basis for then starting to understand, okay, what's really going on in our organisation. So what we did next with all that is we started to put those individual demands, and we sort of start to create these macro journeys. So for the purposes of this, we had our kind of onboarding journey, installation and activation, and we put all of the demands that kind of make up that journey. And then we had our kind of technical support, and then we had our account management, so billing and account admin. And I don't know if the colours don't work very well. I think you had the same problem on there, but or I'm getting colourblind. But you can see that actually you've got the top three on there are in kind of black, and then the rest are in red. So on our onboarding journey, there's a whole lot of red on there. Whereas on the account management, there's a whole lot more black, i.e. more of the simple value demand processors sit in that kind of account admin, and more of the failure demand kind of sits over there. So what we were able to do was come up with around 50 categories of demand, which the next step was to build those into our CRM system. And I cannot overemphasize the value of having all those contact demands in your CRM system. So every time you're kind of logging that contact, you're understanding exactly who that customer is that's making that contact. So every contact, and whether it's a call, it's a chat, ticket, that the agent is saying, this was the demand, we create the drop-down menu, this is the reason why the customer's calling us, and this was our resolution code, I pass on, pass back, etc. So far this year, we've collected data on around 700,000 customer contacts. And on each of those, now we're kind of overlaying the customer data on that as well. It's well over 10 million different data points that we've got. So we know not just who contacts us, but why, when, how often, etc., etc. And I'll show how that starts to become a practical use in a second. In terms of how we start to report on some of this, so this is called Skyline. I didn't invent this. I've copied this from an old friend and colleague. But this is just some of our kind of main customer demands. Again, just to show you how you can start to represent this data when you're sharing it with senior leaders. So in our business, we have a very cyclical business where we get a whole load of kind of new customers joining us in quarter three. It's one of my operational challenges. So you're seeing that here in terms of customers contacting us to activate. We get this massive spike coming up here, and actually operationalizing that, i.e. I've got to be able to handle that big uplift in that demand, is one of my challenges. If I look at this one, for example, again, you see the wanted to book an installation. That's because we've been gradually increasing the number of customers that need a physical install. So we're seeing that come through. But interestingly, for customers that have contacting us because of a speed issue, for example, you see that's pretty flat and pretty predictable, as is the customers contacting us to pay a bill. So already we're starting to see that we've got different types of demand. And again, I'm going at this demand level. It's a much lower level than the kind of customer journey level. It's the individual customer demand. It's also really helpful to track your mix of failure demand and value demand that's coming in on a daily, weekly basis. If you've seen a big spike of calls in the last week, well, why was it? What caused that? And we can track that down to individual levels. But over time, obviously, I want to see the red line coming down. We want to see less failure demand in the system and more value demand. As you can see, we're not doing that yet. It's really tough actually tackling some of that failure demand. But understanding that mix is really important. What it's also enabled us to do is to understand. Again, this is weekly data. The call types by week, by that kind of customer journey. So you see our onboarding, which is that blue line at the top, that really shapes our business operationally, and that's the one that we have to be able to respond to. Whereas some of the other customer journeys, what's account admin, sort of technical support, actually relatively stable. This one is interesting because it's the it's our we call loss of service. So customers are contacting us to say, well, I've got no internet, which happens when you're an internet business. It goes down sometimes. So guess what happened on this week? We had a massive nationwide outage for a few hours, and suddenly, like, one of my colleagues contacted me and said, "Don't panic, Rob." So when someone says "don't panic," the first thing you do is panic. They said, "Don't look at the wallboard." So I looked at the wallboard, and there were about 800 calls queuing. I was like, "Oh my god!" So again, we can see that, and again, some of these weeks where we've had those big outages, it's helpful then to overlay that with your contact volume data, and you sort of start to explain, okay, why we're getting that. What I also want to show you is how we're at this real kind of detail level, we're using the individual customer demands for our kind of sort of planning as well. So we started this a year ago, so we've now got a full 12 months worth of data. So I think for next year, this has been really helpful for our planning. So as an operations director, I've got to try to plan my resource so that I don't have a kind of hotel late night dinner situation, and I've got the right number of people there to serve a number of customers. So with activations, forecasting how high this peak will go next year, and recognizing that kind of pattern of getting that peak is really important. But there's a kind of a clear pattern to that. With this one, with outages, that's really, I mean, if anyone goes, I'm a bit of a data geek, you can put a control chart line here, sort of draw the mean across their upper and lower control limits. That's really hard to forecast and really hard to resource against. So from a kind of automation, digital point of view, if I can find a way of automating my response to handling those rather than trying to handle it with people, that's going to be really helpful to me, because that's a really hard one to manage. The installation follows a similar kind of path to the activations, and again the bill payment is, again, it's going up slightly because we're growing our customer base. Anyone want to guess what happened here? I can point here. What caused that? It's not complicated. So we had an issue with our online payments. Customers couldn't make online payments. How did we find out about the issue with online payments? We saw we were getting this big increase in "I want to pay my bill" calls coming through. So without that kind of level of data, we probably wouldn't even have known we were having that payments issue. So again, it's really helpful that you've got this granular level of customer data. And then again, there's just different ways you can cut this data. So sort of next two slides show that we've got the blue line is what I call ordered not yet active customers. So this is the peak in the summer, and our contacts from new customers and existing customers remains relatively flat. Again, you see those spikes there. Again, that's caused by kind of network outages. However, what we can also do, and it's just an example, is that we can then drill down into those order customers to go, okay, so the blue line here represents what we call our single home customers, i.e. it's a single house where we've got to connect them to the internet, and sometimes we have to go and dig a hole in the road in order to do that. It's a bit more complicated than wiring up a block of flats that's already been kind of connected. So you can see we get a lot more calls from those customers per order than we do from, for example, our new build customers. So when we talk to the marketing guys next year about what's your product mix that you're going to be selling, then that will have a big impact in terms of my call arrival patterns. So by understanding my customer contact at this kind of really granular level, we're able to do some fantastic detailed level of planning. And again, I apologize for showing you Excel spreadsheets, but just to make the point that what we're doing here is we are, for each of those kind of 50 plus demands, which I'm then splitting down between different customer types, we're then applying a ratio of how many calls per order or how many calls per existing customer do we get each month. And we're then using that, and we're doing our call forecasting and our contact forecasting at a demand level and doing a really detailed bottom-up forecast of what volumes will come in. And what it also means is that if we're then doing some initiatives to help to digitize, reduce call demand, etc., getting the cost benefit for that, getting the details for the investment case is really simple, because I've got that granular level of data for each of those contact drivers that's coming in. So it really helps to support the investment case. I'll sort of gloss over this a little bit. Again, this is around the how we handle those calls, so the first contact resolution, and you see here that we've seen a little uptick in our passed on, which I think I understand, because it's due to the number of cases that require an engineer visit to get involved. But again, that actually has a direct impact on customer experience. You can see from where that grey line was earlier in the year to where it is now. A lot more of our demand is having to be passed on to an internal team, and that in turn creates us some challenges from a CX point of view that we are addressing at the moment. What we've also been able to do is, because we've got this all linked into the CRM system, is that we also now measure our CSAT at an individual demand level. So rather than just reporting on a number for CSAT, I can look at the CSAT for activation, connection not working, and we see those differences. And so as we're pulling together that kind of holistic picture of the customer experience and those different customer journeys, we can see really at a detailed level where some of those pain points are. And again, not just at the demand level, but we can then break that demand down into the kind of property types where the customer is in the life cycle, in terms of what that CSAT looks like. And obviously, we are using all the traditional voice of the customer data, like complaints and NPS. We have something called Trustpilot in the UK. I don't know if you have that over here, but it's kind of where customers leave ratings about businesses, and that's really important for us as well, because we have a really good rating on that we're aiming to retain. And so, having done all that, so what? And so what we're been able to do is to take some of that insight and then start to kind of build the business case for the digital transformation. So, our number one contact driver is customers calling us to activate their service, and we're saying, well, okay, so why should the customer need to contact us to do that? Can we not auto-activate, or at least get the customer to self-activate? Customers calling to book an installation. Again, it's another value demand. It's a fairly straightforward process. That's our third biggest contact driver. How do we then get more customers doing that for themselves online? And you can see, rather than just taking a sort of a random approach, there's a really kind of clear hierarchy of which demands you would start to want to automate on here as well. So we're looking at customers paying the bills over the phone through an automated process, some automated SMSs for keeping customers updated on service outages, and so on. So it become really kind of tangible opportunities. So, whistle-stop tour. In conclusion, I would argue that having a very detailed understanding of why your customers contact you is really essential before you start on your digital transformation journey. Secondly, by integrating that customer contact demand reasons with your core CRM and your telephony systems, you can get this fantastic rich source of data that you can then start to use to build the business case for investment in digital transformation. And once you start to overlay NPS data and complaints and so on as well, a fantastic rich picture of what's going on for your customers. So that's that. Thank you very much. I hope you've found that of some use. I hope I've kept you going for the last 30 minutes with graphs and data, which is some challenge. If you want to connect with me, please feel free. It's my LinkedIn details up there, or my email if you want to get in touch. Thank you very much.